we go live. And we'll open the meeting. Good morning. Welcome to the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. My name is Craig Hickman. I represent Senate District 14, 11 towns in Southern Kennebec County. Our day today does not look to be full. We have a work session to begin our work, and then we have 2 public hearings, and we will close the day with a work session scheduled for 1 o'clock p.m. With that in mind, the purpose of this meeting for the beginning of the day is for the committee to receive information from our staff and from any other people in order for members of this committee to consider the proposals before us and make recommendations and reports to the full legislature. Only committee members in this portion of the meeting, the committee analysts, and those specifically invited to attend will be participating in this work session using the Zoom format. For members of the public wishing to observe this meeting, it is being live streamed on the committee's YouTube channel and will also be recorded for viewing after this meeting is concluded. If you are going to be invited into the panel for further information, you will go through what I call the wormhole. You will be here shortly, so you have not been dropped from the call. So before we begin our work, I would like to turn it over to the rest of the committee to introduce themselves, and I will go in the order of my screen, beginning with Representative Corey.
You caught me off guard. Good morning, I'm Patrick Corey. I represent House District 25, which is part of Windham.
Representative McCrate.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm Jay McCrate, representing Harpswell, West Bath, and Northeast Brunswick in the House.
Senator Miramont.
Hello, Dave Miramont, Senate District 12, which is Knox County, except for the town of Washington. And one of these days I'll read off all the towns, but I didn't have it right in front of me.
Senator Farron.
Good morning, all. My name is Brad Farron. I live in Norridge Walk, and I have the privilege of representing the majority of Somerset County in the town of Rome in Kennebec County.
Representative Kinney.
Good morning, I'm Mary Ann Kinney. I represent House District 99, 9 towns in Western Waldo County.
Representative Wood.
Good morning, I'm Barb Wood, and I represent District 38, which is the western end of the peninsula in Portland, where it is very sunny today.
And Chairman Chiazzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Chris Chiazzo, House District 28. West Scarborough, and someday I am going to find out what makes the town of Washington exceptional. Thank you.
We also have with us our able committee clerk, Karen Montel, and our OPLA analyst, Janet Stocco, who will walk us through the work that we will begin with. And so on that note, I will open the work session on LD 1754, an act to modify the reporting requirements for major contributors to ballot question campaigns. And before, Janet, you begin by sharing your screen, let us allow Representative Topeka to introduce herself.
My computer froze. Were you speaking to me? Okay, I got just that much. Good morning. My name is Laura Topeka, and I'm a representative for District 126 here in Bangor.
Good to see you. Good morning. Janet, the Zoom is yours.
Good morning, everyone. LD 1754 is an act to modify the reporting requirements for major contributors to ballot question campaigns. This was our former chair's bill, but it actually was submitted by the Ethics Commission. So in 2018, the legislature enacted a law that newly required major contributors, which it defined as non-individuals who contribute more than $100,000 to a single ballot question committee or political action committee for the purpose of initiating or influencing a direct initiative or people's veto referendum campaign, to file a report with the Commission on Governmental Ethics and Election Practices that contains certain specified information. This bill, which is an Ethics Commission bill, would amend that major contributor reporting law by exempting a major contributor that is also a political action committee or a ballot question committee from filing this major contributor report. I think because they already file other reports as a PAC or ballot question committee. In addition, the bill would permit a major contributor to request a modification of the current requirement that in its report, it must disclose its 5 largest sources of income during the time period beginning 6 months before it made its first contribution and ending on the date it filed its report. And it would restructure the enforcement provisions regarding potential violations of this major contributor statute and the factors that the Ethics Commission must consider in assessing penalties. So you may be familiar, I made a side-by-side of the existing law with what the bill proposes. So as you can see, the major contributors that are covered, again, are those that contribute more than $100,000 to a PAC or ballot question committee for a single people's veto or direct initiative campaign. Under current law, only individuals are accepted from this definition, but the bill would also accept registered PACs and ballot question committees from this definition. Under current law and the bill, and this becomes important later, so I'll go over it, the PAC or the ballot question committee that receives these contributions, which is identified as the recipient in the law, must notify the major contributor and the Ethics Commission usually within 5 days after receiving the final contribution that brings the major contributors total to over $100,000. If it's within 13 days before the election, however, instead of sending that notice within 5 days, it must send that notice within 24 hours. After receiving that notice, the major contributor then has its own responsibilities. So under the statute, the major contributor must file a report with the Ethics Commission by the next regular campaign finance filing deadline after it receives the notice from the recipient that's just been described, or within 24 hours of receiving that notice if it receives that notice within 13 days before the election. In that report that the major contributor files, it must include the name and contact information of itself and of a responsible officer. It must describe its organizational form and purpose, the amount and date of each contribution it made to the PAC or ballot question committee, and either list the dates, sources, and amounts of contributions it received for the purposes of initiating or influencing the direct initiative or people's veto, or certify that it didn't receive any contributions for that purpose. It must also list the names of the 5 largest sources of funds that it received, except funds that are restricted to purposes unrelated to a direct initiative or people's veto campaign. And the time period during which it calculates those 5 largest sources of funds are the 6 months before it made its first contribution and the date that the report is filed. So during that time period, what are its 5 largest sources of funds that aren't restricted to non-ballot question purposes? And finally, the report has to include a statement whether it's tax exempt under federal law and all the years, listing all the jurisdictions in which it filed campaign finance reports in the last year. Under the bill, there is a new procedure for the major contributor to seek a modification of this paragraph E requirement about naming the 5 largest sources of funds. That modification requirement does not exist in current law. So the major contributor may request that the Ethics Commission modify the requirement and instead accept a financial disclosure report that's required under any other law. If such request is made, the Ethics Commission is directed to consider the major contributor's financial and staffing resources, the cost and amount of time to reasonably gather the information on the 5 largest sources of income, the public interest in receiving this information on the 5 largest sources of income, and any other relevant factors. In addition, under current law, there are penalty provisions that the bill rewrites for a little bit more clarity and adds a little specificity. So under current law, the recipient committee can be penalized for failing to timely provide the required notice to the major contributor. The bill also provides that the recipient committee can be penalized for failing to provide a copy of that notice to the Ethics Commission. That copy to the Ethics Commission is required under current law, but it's not specified as a reason that the recipient committee can be penalized. In addition, under current law, the major contributor could be penalized for failing to file a timely report with the Ethics Commission. The bill also adds as a possible reason for penalizing the major contributor that it would file a report, but it doesn't substantially conform to the requirements of the statute. Under both existing law and the bill, a preliminary penalty would be imposed for any of those violations. That's either 10% of the total contributions that must be reported or $50,000, whichever is smaller. In addition, under current law and the bill, the person who's received a notice of a preliminary penalty can request a reduction of the penalty amount within 5 days of receiving the notice of that preliminary penalty. They would then appear before the Ethics Commission or submit a sworn statement, and the final penalty would be imposed at a meeting and may be appealed to the Superior Court. The statute sets forth the factors the Ethics Commission must consider when deciding a request to reduce a penalty. And those existing factors and the ones under the bill match for a major contributor. So the Ethics Commission would consider the failure of the recipient committee to notify the major contributor of its reporting requirement, the number of days the report is late, the amount of contributions required to be reported, and any other relevant factors. The bill newly specifies some additional factors that are relevant to the recipient's failure to send that notice either to the major contributor or the Ethics Commission. And those include whether the delay in notifying the major contributor delayed the filing of the major contributor's own report, and whether the recipient made a bona fide effort to provide notice as required. My light just went out, but I think you could still see me. At the hearing, the Maine Citizens for Clean Elections proposed amending the bill to, instead of allowing a major contributor to request a modification of the requirement that it report the 5 largest sources of funds, to instead categorically exclude the following sources of funds from being reported. First, funds that are restricted to purposes that are unrelated to a people's veto referendum or direct initiative campaign in the state. And this is the current law exception from the 5 largest sources of funds, so that wouldn't be a change to current law. But the Maine Citizens for Clean Elections proposal would add 2 new categories, including funds derived in the normal course of business by the major contributor and funds received from another entity that's owned in whole or in part by the major contributor. I would note, if you wanted to adopt this proposed amendment, you might want to use the phrase business entity rather than entity and use the same definition that's been adopted for that phrase several times throughout the election laws. The Maine Citizens for Clean Elections explained that its proposed amendment would be a blanket categorical rule regarding the source of funds that are subject to this major contributor reporting requirement, and they believe that it's better to have a categorical rule than require the Ethics Commission staff to make a case-by-case determination whether the reporting requirement is too burdensome for any particular entity. During the public hearing, the director of the Ethics Commission also requested time to draft a proposed amendment that would deal with an issue that's come up. So last year, when the legislature streamlined and aligned the registration and reporting requirements for political action committees and ballot question committees, the Ethics Commission learned that the cost to reprogram its electronic filing system would be greater than $100,000. They hope to avoid incurring this cost by allowing ballot question committees to register and file as a subcategory of PACs within the electronic filing system. To accomplish that, the Ethics Commission has now requested that the committee amend the bill by adding the following provisions. So in current law, where there is the requirement that the Ethics Commission adopt its electronic filing system, you would add language that says, notwithstanding any provision of this title to the contrary, or this chapter to the contrary, for the purposes of entering, receiving information, the electronic filing system shall categorize ballot question committees as a subcategory of political action committee. I have worked with the Ethics Commission on this proposed amendment and run this proposal by our deputy director, and he believes that this would work rather than having the committee have to go through all of Title 21A and recategorize ballot question committees as a type of political action committee. If you want to do that, you're certainly welcome to, and the director and I have some ideas about how to accomplish that. We could certainly draft that language if that's the route you want to go. but I think that this might be preferable to you because it would allow the committee's determination and then the legislature's determination of how to categorize these committees to stand, but it would just allow the electronic filing system to be slightly differently modeled. I would, however, suggest that if you want to adopt this amendment, you consider changing shall to may. In that way, if in the future the vendor decides that it doesn't cost $100,000 to reprogram the system, the Ethics Commission could go ahead and have that reprogramming done. Or if a new vendor is selected, then the new vendor could set it up so that ballot question committees aren't a subcategory and no laws would have been violated. And right now, we don't have any fiscal information on this.
Thank you, Janet. Are there any questions from the committee? My analyst. I do know that Director Wayne is here, and I'm going to promote him because I have a few questions for him. Director Wayne, thank you for being here. Good morning. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. Oh, please introduce myself. I'm Jonathan Wayne. Sorry, I didn't hear the whole. I'm Jonathan Wayne. I'm the Executive Director of the State Ethics Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I would also like to allow Representative Riley to introduce himself. He's joined us since we began.
Hi, sorry for joining late. I'm Representative Morgan Riley, and I represent House District 34, which is part of Westbrook.
Thank you. Good morning. Are there any members of the committee that have any questions for Director Wayne based upon the bill analysis before I begin? Seeing none. Oh, wait. Senator Mearmont.
Well, you threw that in at the end. It doesn't have to be before you begin. You can go if you want, and it might be answered by the time you're done.
I defer. Okay.
So also, when you're speaking, Mr. Wayne, well, actually, it's questions. What do you think about the Maine Center for Clean Elections comments, Mr. Brodigan, and how did you incorporate those in your amendment, or is yours just about the way PACs or question committees are addressed and your technology and ability to do it? But it also, the other part spoke to you are having to make judgment calls on stuff. So those are the three things that stuck out in reading testimony. If you could throw that into some kind of package for me to help understand where to go. Thank you.
Sure. The really grateful for the opportunity to address the committee and thank the committee analyst for her consideration. And if you do move forward with the committee amendment that we proposed, I do think her suggestion of changing shall to may is a very good one. The amendment that we proposed really doesn't have anything to do with the major contributor reporting. It is to help us deal with this other situation of how do ballot question committees register and file reports with us, given some high technology costs that we were given by our vendor. So I am fine. We had found that some of the major contributors that are giving money to PACs and PQCs to influence a ballot question committee receive their top revenue from commercial activities, and they expressed to us that it was burdensome for them to figure out their 5 largest sources, and maybe there were some privacy issues involved in our. So we proposed a balancing test where people could ask for a modification, which would basically be an exception or a waiver from having to report their 5 largest revenue sources in the prior 6 months. And we would do sort of a balancing test. And what I expressed to the committee in the public hearing is that this decision, whether to provide them the waiver or the exception, would be done by our commissioners in a public session based on the factors that are in statute and any other factors that they thought was appropriate. That was our initial outlook. We heard from the Clean Elections Advocates what their preference was just a sort of a more of a general exclusion that would apply to all commercial entities that receive revenue in the ordinary course of their business. That would be fine with us. That's fine. If you want to consider that as an alternative, we're open-minded. That would be fine. They also threw in didn't want to say it lightly, but there was something else in the proposal that Janet described that I'm about a revenue that they came from an entity that they controlled or owned. And I actually haven't given that very much. I don't know what that proposal is. So I'm sorry, I'm not quite comfortable with that one just because I don't really know what actually that's meant to get at. But the idea of switching what we propose to just a blanket exception for commercial entities would be fine with us.
Thank you.
Just to follow up, Mr. Chair.
You may proceed.
Please. Thank you. I'll just throw out, you make a good point. For one thing, since I just joined the committee, I didn't hear the public hearing. I'm just following up from the testimony, which is a little thin, but probably enough. But the one thing that doesn't have any merit in my mind is that it's inconvenient or burdensome for someone to report the people that are trying to affect the outcome of something that affects all citizens of Maine, and they may not even be from Maine. So just in my deliberations of this, I'm just throwing that out for the committee to think about too, but I don't care if it's hard for them to report things that we need to know. Thank you, Mr. Wayne. Nice to see you.
Thank you. I'm happy to provide more information on the genesis of this or the rationale for this if you'd like, but I'm also happy just to leave it at that too.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Director Wayne? Director, thank you for being here. I think my question is, you got sticker shock when you went to the vendor to comply with the intent of the legislature. And now the office is asking the legislature to amend the bill in order to accommodate the inability of the vendor to reprogram because it is a lot of money. Is that correct?
It's yes. First of all, it's the bill was in excess of $100,000, which we do not want to burden taxpayers with. Also, the bill really should be paid for with general fund money. And as members of the committee have heard me say before, the general fund portion of our budget is so small, we only have $9,000 per year to pay for all administrative expenses that should be paid for from the general fund, including IT, phones. So we really don't have a way to pay for it from general fund money. So we would have to pay $100,000, we would have to charge, for example, the Maine Clean Election Fund, which it isn't really an appropriate cost for that fund, because this is really more about disclosure than it is running a public financing program. So we just, it's more money than we want to pay, and we don't really have an appropriate way to pay for it. Those are the two factors.
Thank you, Director. And is it possible for the commission to ask the legislature through a line item in any budget or in a bill to appropriate the money necessary to meet the will of the people as expressed last session without increasing your budget on an ongoing basis? I make a one-time request for the expenditure to reprogram this so that the intent of the legislature can be met.
Yes, I'm not an expert on all aspects of the budget process, but yes, I mean, if, right, we can, for this bill, well, honestly, I have to think it through, Senator, to give you a really effective answer. The law change that requires this IT change has actually already become law in 2021.
Correct.
So if this were a new bill that had costs associated with it, I know there's a way for us to give a fiscal estimate to the fiscal office, and then the legislature is free to decide whether or not it wants to spend special money for this. But since the cost has already become law and we're just trying to adapt to that, I don't know if there is a mechanism for, there must be some way to do it, and maybe others who are smarter about the legislative process know how to do it, but I'm afraid I don't know how to suggest it.
No problem, Director
Okay.
Wayne. Janet, can you help me with the question that I'm asking?
I think that it would be possible for this committee, if and when we receive our portion of the supplemental budget in a report back to AFA, to request that whatever our portion of that supplemental budget is, include an additional initiative that would appropriate the cost of the filing system, but you then have to wait and see how that gets through the process before deciding whether you believe that you need this amendment instead. For example, if that $100,000 or whatever the actual cost is, isn't paid for through the budget process. But I think you could do it that way. You could just also independently write a letter to AFA, but it might make sense to make it part of the supplemental budget process.
Thank you, Janet. Chairman Chiazzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My concern with going through that process is I think what Director Wayne already stated is it's already law. So if the funding is not approved, he still has to be compliant with the law somehow. So where does that conflict, how does that conflict resolve itself? And I think the simple statement of I believe the amendment addresses that concern. So I think we can address the Maine Citizens for Clean Elections issue. It sounds like we can address that with that broad exemption that Director Wayne is, thinks is a acceptable compromise. And then we can add that amendment language at the end, which would alleviate the funding requirement, but still leave the door open in the future if we need to put that into the general budget, the general fund, if that makes sense.
Yes, I thank you, Chairman Chiazzo. I do agree that because we want the commission to comply with the law and we want everyone who's filing to comply with the law, that we have to make this change because this is, shall we say, a price tag that wasn't anticipated when this went into law. And so now we see that no one can comply with it unless we spend the money. And until we approve the spending of the money, we have to change the law so that folks are in compliance with the law. So I have no problem with the amendment offered by the Ethics Commission with our analyst's suggestion to change shall to may. But I do want to still honor the will of this committee and the general legislature when we passed this law last session. And so we do need to reprogram the system so that we're not having to continue to go forward with having ballot question committees be subsects of political action committees, because the law is not written that way. And we would have to do a plenary change to make that so. So I think that it would make sense for us to consider what we're doing in front of us and also consider asking for there to be an appropriation to cover the cost of reprogramming the system so that the original will of the legislature can be met going forward. Chairman Chiazzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess maybe a question for Director Wayne. Certainly if you've identified the price tag to accomplish this, is there some way that we could work with the department to make sure it's put into a future appropriation to make sure that we use the amendment as a temporary stopgap with the understanding that you're going to go at some point go and request those extra funds accordingly to make sure that we can accommodate the reprogramming?
Yes, I'm happy to be cooperative with asking for that money so we could do that reprogramming. That'd be no problem. And thank you.
Representative McClade.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Director Wayne. I wanted to ask you if you would like to comment Senator Miramont's point about the burden on an entity. And I was going to ask you, would you like to go into the genesis of that concept? I'm looking at your original testimony, but I wondered if you wanted to say more about it. We have exemptions various places here and there, and I just wondered if you'd like to say more about that.
I'll try to be brief because sometimes I feel that I just give long answers that are more than committee members have bargained for. And so the context, Senator Miramont, was that with the NECEC citizen initiative that were just voted on, and the one before that was taken off the ballot, what we found is that there were local PACs and ballot question committees registered and filing reports with us, and they were on both sides of the issue receiving very large contributions from energy companies. And so under the law, these energy companies were required to file a one-time major contributor report describing themselves and their activities and their leadership and other information about themselves. And they all filed those reports on time, or sometimes they were late because they were unaware of them and they paid a penalty. But they largely complied with those, with all of the disclosure requirements, that because they had each given more than $100,000 to a PAC or BQC to influence a ballot question. But the part that we got resistance from them was the fact that they were large energy companies And I wasn't a party to the conversation. This was administered by a former employee who just left our employment. So I don't have all the details, but they said over time, we're a huge energy provision company. We've got all sorts of divisions and accounting systems, and the revenue that we received as private companies that we, from our 5 largest sources in the past 6 months, were from people or businesses, associations, companies that were buying power from us as power generators. These were not people who were giving money to the companies in order to influence an election in Maine. These were just basically consumers of power, of electric power or other kinds of energy. So they asked, those are the people who were asking basically for an exception. And our former employee turned to our counsel, who felt that there were some limits to what the state of Maine could do to require these commercial entities to disclose, to calculate and disclose their 5 largest revenue sources that they from the sale of power. And that was the background on this. It just for your information, it was not people who were involved in the political process that were trying to hide money given for electioneering. It was power companies not wanting to disclose their largest customers. That's sort of the long and short of it.
Can I follow up, Mr. Chair?
You may proceed.
Thank you. And thank you, Director Wayne. I don't think you give too long answers
Thanks.
ever. Can I just help me understand the suggestion from Maine Clean Elections of a more blanket process on this issue? This is the issue we're talking about, that blanket idea was about. And I'm wondering if the flexibility that you describe in what you requested is needed, because you need to sort out whether these are companies who are influencing an election or companies who are buying power. Am I understanding that at all?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're describing it quite accurately. So the way we had written it, a major contributor could request a modification to disclose their 5 largest sources of funds in the prior 6 months, and we would be required to consider their financial and staffing resources and the cost and the amount of time it would take them to gather the information and the public interest in having access to the information and other relevant factors. So the way we wrote it up, there would sort of be a balancing test, and it wouldn't necessarily just apply to commercial businesses. It could apply to national nonprofits or advocacy organizations, and we would receive their request and we would consider them on a case-by-case basis. And I think the point from the government reform groups and clean elections advocates is that they worry about the commission being under pressure to make exceptions, and they would rather not it be handled on a case-by-case exception that should just be sort of a universal exception that applies to commercial entities. I hate to speak for them, but I think that's their idea. And I don't know. I mean, I'm biased. I mean, I think our commissioners can sort that out and make the relevant, and they are not shrinking violets. I don't believe they and so I think they'll, if we have the authority to grant case-by-case exceptions, I can't help but think they would exercise that authority appropriately, but I'm also fine to go in the other direction too. That would be fine.
Are there any other questions for Director Wayne? My question is a little bit of a wrench, I guess, Director, and I ought to know the answer, but I'm going to just play ignorant and say, can we limit the amount of money anyone contributes to a ballot question committee or a PAC at $100,000, so we don't even have to go any further than that? Or is that a constitutional question?
I think it is a constitutional question. I think you could not limit that. Yeah.
And thank you. You mentioned that your staff, which is wonderful, are not shrinking violets. No, they're not. But my question is, what kind of staff time do you think it would take to sort of sort through all of these exception requests?
I apologize, Senator. I think we will not get too many exceptions. And every time we did get an exception, it would probably cost us, say, total staff time of 20 hours to present it to our commissioners. And they're the ones that I was saying we're not shrinking violets. They would stand up for disclosure. They believe in disclosure. And so
thank you for that.
That's about it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for that clarity. It is the commissioners that we recommend for confirmation. Representative Wood has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Wayne or Director Wayne, in the analysis, when it talks about the Maine Clean Election campaign, it lists three things, A, B, and C. And A, it says about the funds being restricted to purposes that are unrelated to a people's veto referendum. And Janet said that's already covered in law. So we don't really need to do anything in order to do what the Maine Clean Elections wants us to do. I mean, their request, it's already covered. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, it's really only their B and C that we're concerned with or need to consider. And B is the one that Representative McCrade and Senator Merrimon have asked about it. And I have the same question. I understand what you're saying is that there's no shrinking violets on the commission, and people will do their job, but we never know what the future will hold. And I'd rather have it in writing, as this is what is to be considered. And I absolutely agree that, somebody's largest business clients don't have anything to do. They're just paying for their product. They're not involved in a political campaign. They might feel the opposite of where the company is trying to influence. So I am definitely interested in an amendment on that B. But the C is the one where I think I heard you say that you'd need to look at that more closely, that you weren't aware that they were asking about if they own another business entity. Is that correct? That you would want some more time to think about that one?
I just want to, yes, that's correct. Thank you, Representative. And I apologize to them. We had some communications prior to the public hearing, but I haven't caught up with them since then. And this is a new concept for me. So I just don't know what it's intended to get at. I don't want to speak for them. I just can't quite sign on to it and say I understand it if I don't really understand it. So that's my only hesitation on that little piece.
Right. So I would like to give you that time and have you come back to talk to us about that. And at the same time, I'd like to propose that we look at an amendment about the funds that are from the normal course of business. I'd like to make that change.
Thank you, Representative, for that suggestion. My read of C, and this certainly will be something to be verified by Director and his staff, is that it would be slightly redundant to have to list that party if that business entity is owned by the major contributor. So it just seems to me that that's how straightforward that is. I could be wrong. I wasn't here for the public hearing, and I don't see anyone from Maine Clean Elections in the gallery to see if that is what they intended. But it doesn't seem like we're going to take action on this today anyway. And so we certainly have time to get that information from the Maine Clean Elections, who have submitted that as a proposed remedy to the disclosure requirements that we have passed. And so thank you, Director Wayne. Are there any other questions from the committee for the director while he is here today? I know that we have deadlines. We would like to meet them all, but we also want to do thorough work. And so I would entertain a motion from the committee at this time. Senator Fan. Oh, sorry, Representative Wood, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I'm just jumping in. I'd like to propose that we table.
Representative Wood has moved that we table LD 7.
Second.
It's been moved by Representative Wood and seconded by Senator Farren that we table LD 1754. There is no debate on this motion. And so with that, Karen, when you are ready, please call the roll.
Certainly. Senator Hickman.
Yay.
Senator Hickman, yay. Senator Mearmont.
Yay.
Senator Mearmont, yay. Senator Farren.
Yes.
Senator Farren, yes. Representative Chiazzo.
Yes.
Representative Chiazzo, yes. Representative McCray.
Yes.
Representative McCray, yes. Representative Riley.
Yes.
Representative Riley, yes. Representative Supika.
Yes.
Representative Supika, yes. Representative Wood.
Yes.
Representative Wood, yes. Representative Kinney.
Yes.
Representative Kinney, yes. Representative Harrington. Representative Harrington, absent. Representative Corey.
Yes.
Representative Corey, yes. Representative Dolph. Representative Dolph, absent. 10 in favor of the motion, 0 opposed to the motion, and 2 members absent, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Karen. It means that the motion to table prevails. I will close the work session on LD 1754. Thank you, Director Wayne, for answering our questions.
Thank you.
And we are going to just take a minute to reset here because we are going to move into the public hearing portion of our agenda today. And I do believe, yes, that the sponsor of our next bill is with us. I am going to promote her to panelist. And before I open the public hearing, I just want to let the public know we are now in the portion of our day where public comment is accepted. We are still streaming live. You will be recorded for future reference. You can be heard live both on our YouTube channel and by audio stream. So please keep your comments for the record, something that you want anyone to hear because they will be archived. There is still no ability to ask questions about substantive issues in our chat. If you have a question about the order or you're having technical difficulties, you may use the chat for that function. During this part of our day, Chairman Chiazzo will be keeping time. Members of the public, notwithstanding legislators, have 3 minutes to present their testimony on any bill. We tend to take testimony in the order of in favor of, opposed to, and neither for nor against. We allow any co-sponsor of a bill to go first after the sponsor presents, and they have unlimited time. And then we tend to move toward the public testimony and then anyone who is a paid lobbyist on to testify on the bills in the orders that I've said. So without further ado, and Chairman Chiazzo, did I miss anything? Thanks, sir. I will open the public hearing on LD 1927, an act to authorize certain off-premises sales of adult use marijuana, sponsored by a Republican leader in the House, Representative Kathleen Dillingham. Welcome, Kathleen. Representative Dillingham, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you. Let me get to my testimony here. Hold on one moment.
And Representative Dillingham, I know we're on Zoom, and so I guess you can't really offer us anything, having been on this committee in the past, but I thought I would just put that out there anyway.
Yes, certainly if I'd been able to be there in person, I would have brought you either the donuts that I normally would have brought to committee or some other baked item. But good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Chiazzo, and the distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. I am Kathleen Dillingham, and I represent the towns of Mechanic Falls, Otisfield, and Oxford. As a former member of this committee, it is a pleasure to come before you, even if remotely. I am here today to present LD 1927, an act to authorize certain off-premise sales of adult use marijuana. I was not supportive of medical marijuana when it came before the people, and at one time I did not support adult use when bills came to the chamber or at the ballot. I will admit that I was guilty of only thinking of cannabis use in the stereotypical view that once prevailed. Member of this committee, it is a pleasure to come. A portrayal from Hollywood and elsewhere that those using cannabis were individuals smoking so much marijuana that they were not contributing members of society. For those old enough, think back to the Cheech and Chong movies and such. Please understand that I mean no offense, but rather I am trying to explain a shift needed in society one that I believe is happening around the use of a natural organic material versus a man-made compound. I understand it will take time for that societal shift. Prohibition ended in 1933, and we still debate distribution, public consumption, growlers, and drinks to go and such. What I've come to learn is that for many people, the use of cannabis and its derivatives offers an alternative to prescription medications, but that the stigma of use can remain just as with alcoholic consumption. We have all seen the many storefronts where individuals can either enter to purchase through the medical marijuana program or adult use, but for some citizens, especially our elderly population, the stigma of yesteryears remains for them. In one case, I had a constituent share with me that the use of a cannabis-based salve helps ease pain associated with her arthritis, but she's too ashamed to have people in the community to see her vehicle at the shop, so she has a family member purchase for her. I have had others express how cannabis and related items helps with insomnia, anxiety, depression, nausea from cancer treatment, seizures, and management of pain. It has allowed these individuals to reduce reliance on prescription medications, and in some cases, under the supervision of their healthcare provider, fully replace a prescription medication. Certainly in cases of pain management, where Maine experienced 636 overdose deaths in 2021, a 23% increase over 2020, we should be looking to support alternative treatments that can successfully treat the condition versus relying on opioid prescriptions. This past summer, I was also approached by a few members of municipal government asking if they were allowed to permit an individual to host a Brewfest event that also would allow cannabis-based vendors. After checking with the Office of Marijuana Policy, I confirmed with them that they could not permit off-premise sales of cannabis. Having sat on this committee through the process of allowing retail sales of beer, wine, and spirits at farmers markets, it came to me that perhaps we could mimic the permitting process and apply it to an off-premise license for the sales of cannabis and its byproducts. By bringing a legal product to public events, many of which focus on Maine-made and agricultural products, we could move the needle in dispelling some of the stigma around cannabis use, as well as allowing producers to share educational materials around their products. If allowed, the current rules in Title 28-A, subsection 1366, used to permit retail sales of farmers markets could be used as a guideline and further amended to specifically address the sales of cannabis and byproducts at farmers markets, fairs, and festivals. Should this proposal move forward, I support that no permit be issued unless the farmers market, fair, or festival approves of such sales at their event. I support that municipal approval is required and that the licensee must keep accurate records of what will be sold off premise. I also support the current restrictions on the public use of marijuana and public consumption of cannabis byproducts. I thank you for your time and consideration, and I would be happy to try to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Representative Dillingham, for presenting this bill and for being here today. Will your testimony be online at some point in the future, or at least distributed to us so we can have it?
Certainly, I'm happy to go ahead and forward that to you. I have taken to not presenting my written testimony when I am presenting via Zoom, just from my own experience. In this platform, I know I tend to sit and read ahead and don't actually listen to the person testifying. So this way I was assured that I would have your captured attention, but yes, I will get that to you. Thank you for your asking.
Representative Corey has a question, followed by Senator Farron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nice to see you here, Representative Dillingham. I'm glad you brought up public use kind of at the end there. I think that, one sort of big concern we have is smoking, laws. When you talk about this, like, do you envision sort of that it would be edibles that they would be accessing, do you know what I mean, at a venue or something like that, not necessarily something that would be smoked, or what? How do you envision that?
So I think that really is up to the committee, and certainly individuals that have more education around the byproducts that are available than what I can offer. I do know that when we talked and we had this discussion about allowing the sales of beer and wine and spirits at farmers markets, we went into the same discussion. Well, how do we prevent somebody from purchasing at that vendor stand at a farmer's market and then stepping away, uncapping whatever they purchased and drinking that? I mean, we already have laws to address that. And if an individual is going to break that law, it doesn't matter if they're purchasing that at a farmer's market or a fair or festival. They could do the same thing when they leave their local Roopers and decide to drink in their vehicle. So in this instance, if you want to make a list of what individuals can share, can go ahead and take off premise to sell. If you want to say it can be, salves and tinctures and such, you can do that. But at the same time, you could be walking down the street and an individual can have a tin full of gummies in their pocket and pop one in their mouth. And you're not going to know whether it is a regular, gummy bear from Germany, or if it's a gummy bear that they're taking to help them with their seizures or anxiety they might be facing. I just want to try to remove that stigma. And really, I was surprised, and it really has been over the past year, the number of people that have approached me and had these conversations with me. But I want to remove the stigma of those individuals that are embarrassed that they're using something that is an organic, and I mean organic not because it's not treated with pesticides, but organic from nature to help them with whatever medical issues they're experiencing. But if they were to go and get a prescription from their doctor of an opioid and take that in pill form, there's no stigma there. They're using that to help their whatever medical issue they're experiencing. But the minute that we associate the term cannabis with it, we instantly go back to this mindset that there's this stigma and moral, feeling against it. And that's what I'm trying to attempt. That if we could bring this more into mainstream and first looking at those farmers markets and fairs and festivals where we see a lot of agricultural products, then maybe we can cross over that threshold.
Just real quick follow-up. I guess more what I was envisioning was, I think that, did you mention like beer festivals? Do you know what I mean? And stuff like that, where, people are, openly, consuming beer. And granted, those venues, do you know what I mean, are always kind of in a place where, it's allowed to. But I know that our sort of public, smoking laws with regard to cannabis are different, and that's something that would need to be addressed. So
right.
That's all I was kind of asking.
Yep. In my testimony, I said that this isn't about changing those unless the committee wanted to do that, but that I support the current prohibitions against public use around whether you are smoking marijuana or any other prohibitions that currently exist.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Farron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Dillingham, for being here this morning. Actually, Representative Corey addressed one of my questions. My other one is just a comment. We take IOUs here, so even though we're not in person, we'll be available on the 10th. So you're not off the hook from testifying in front of the committee.
I'll be sure to make sure I get some goodies delivered to each office, but most likely I'd be dropping those off in Senator Timberlake's office, and I'm not sure if they'd still be there by the time you got to them.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the bill sponsor at this time? Seeing none, thank you very much, Representative Dillingham, and I'll see you in the committee.
Yes, have a great day. I'll hang out here for a little while.
Since Representative Dillingham is the only sponsor of the bill, we don't have any co-sponsors. So I will move to take testimony from the public in favor of the bill. And we have Paul McCarrier and Alicia Melnick. And so I will promote them both at this time. And I will take Since Alicia is here first, welcome, Alicia Melnick. The Zoom is yours.
Thank you so much, Senator Hickman, Representative Chiazzo, and members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. Good morning. My name is Alicia Melnick. I am here today as the former political director for the campaign that legalized marijuana for adults in 21 and over in 2016, and a current member of Maine's Marijuana Advisory Committee. Today in support of LD 1927, an act to authorize certain off-premises sales of adult use marijuana. And I just want to thank Representative Dillingham for bringing this forward to you today. As you all know, Maine voters first approved question 1 to legalize, regulate, and tax marijuana for adults 21 and over 5 years ago for 3 main reasons: health, public safety, and revenue. And Maine businesses and consumers continue to wait the opportunity to take full advantages of the jobs, revenue, and public safety benefits of the law. This is no mystery to you all. The legislature has worked through and made changes to the alcohol laws, including our craft beer industry laws for years and decades, and continue to do so, and this industry is no different. This bill before you today just represents a common sense change to the law to update it to reflect the just behaviors of legal consumers and legally authorized businesses in order to help better meet those consumers' needs. So I really appreciate the representative for bringing this forward, and thank you all for considering it today.
Thank you, Ms. Melnick. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, have a great day.
Thank you.
Next up is Paul McCarrier. Please introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and you are testifying in favor. The Zoom is yours, sir.
Good morning. My name is Paul T. McCarrier. I am a member of the Craft Cannabis Association. I am located in Monroe, Maine, and I own a store in Belfast, Maine. I'm here to testify in support of this bill today. Pardon my appearance. I'm working right now, so that's why you can enjoy my lovely background of space. But at the same time, I just think it's really important that we continue to work to destigmatize the legal use of cannabis. Cannabis use is already happening. How many times have any of you gone to a farmer's market, a state fair, or anything else and smelled that sweet aroma of cannabis? Well, that aroma means that cannabis use is happening. It's just not happening in a regulated fashion. The bill that Representative Dillingham is proposing will offer an opportunity for this to happen in a regulated fashion, and for an opportunity for legal, regulated, and tax-paying businesses to have the ability to be able to benefit from a tax and regulated marketplace and to be able to sell in a off-premises area. We all know that cannabis sales happen, whether they're legal or not. They've been happening for 50 years. I just think that it's the responsibility of the state government, and I hope this committee agrees, is to make it as easy as possible for regulated businesses to be able to continue to compete against the unregulated marketplace. And while there's no moral aversion to the traditional market, which has gotten us to where we are today, is that we need to have the state government, both the legislative branch and the executive branch, move forward with policies that will make us business friendly. It is not easy to be in business right now. Expenses are raising sky high. The expenses for electricity have doubled for many people participating in this market. So we need to offer them more venues and more avenues to be able to legally sell their products and be able to continue to stay in business and employ Mainers. One thing that I think is important that I hope you will consider with this bill is that this bill should also apply to medical cannabis, because it is currently in the proposed Office of Marijuana Policy rules that they will not allow off-premises consumption or off-premises events for medical cannabis events. And so any sort of law that moves forward from this committee that includes adult use cannabis, I believe should also include medical cannabis when it comes to off-site sales, but not necessarily off-site consumption. With that being said, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McCarrier. Are there any questions from the committee? Representative McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mr. McCarrier. Could you just remind me, are you involved in both medical and adult use? I just don't remember. Thanks.
No, I am currently just involved in medical. I would love to be involved in adult use, but as being a small business owner. I have no outside financing. It is just me. And I thankfully haven't had to ask my family for financing yet. Adult use is purely too expensive. The cost of regulation and the taxes make it difficult for an independent business owner to be involved. And so I think that's an important piece of information that you all consider as you move forward with the discussions of regulating this industry. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. McCarrier? Seeing none, thank you for being here today, sir. Is there anyone else who is attending this meeting who wishes to speak in favor of LD 1927 but did not sign up to do so? Please raise your hand. Seeing none, we will now turn to testimony in opposition to LD 1927. I'll begin with Hillary Schneider from the American Cancer Society Action Network. Good morning, Ms. Schneider. Please introduce yourself, and the Zoom is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Chiazzo, and members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. My name is Hillary Schneider, and I'm the Regional Government Relations Director for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. In this role, I serve as the lead government relations director for Maine. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to testify in opposition to 1927, as we believe this bill could lead to an increase in underage sales of age-restricted products, an increased enforcement confusion, and additional challenges with our tobacco control laws, both in terms of retail and smoke-free public place laws. This year alone, more than 10,000 Mainers will be diagnosed with cancer. Maine's cancer incidence rate is significantly higher than the national average, driven largely by higher than average incidence rates of tobacco-related cancers. Maine has the 6th highest rate of tobacco-related cancer cases in the nation and the 11th highest rate of tobacco-related cancer deaths. Here in Maine, 1 in 3 high school students use tobacco products. An important component of evidence-based tobacco control efforts is restricting underage sales, as nearly 95% of adult smokers started by the age of 21. Under Maine law, you may know the tobacco products definition includes electronic smoking devices, pipes, and rolling papers. It's important that the definition include these products, as it's impossible to determine if nicotine or tobacco is present in these products without testing them. All retailers who sell tobacco products must be licensed tobacco retailers. As such, many adult use marijuana retailers are also licensed as tobacco retailers and must comply with tobacco retail laws. The latest annual report for Maine's underage tobacco sales inspection program states numerous challenges with the program right now. These challenges include disruptions in compliance checks due to high rates of COVID cases, and also noted challenges as a result of the issuance of hundreds of adult use retail and medical marijuana store licenses. And I cite in my written testimony, which I'll provide you more about that, but you can read more about that. In that report, we saw underage sale violation rates of nearly 9% in 3 Maine counties, Penobscot, Piscataquis, and Androscoggin. Our organization also opposes smoking tobacco products, as you know, but also the smoking or aerosolization of marijuana in public places, because the carcinogens in marijuana smoke pose numerous health hazards to the person using the product and others in the person's presence. So our opposition to this bill really is around, it's not clear how age restrictions for sales of these products would be enforced in temporary off-premise settings, especially given the challenges we're already seeing in enforcement of our underage tobacco sales products. Also, we know that there's confusion in the retailer market around the laws and how they interplay, including in our smoke-free laws, especially for those that fall under the statutory definition of outdoor eating area where smoking is prohibited. Allowing for the off-premises sales of marijuana would put greater pressure on the already limited capacity of the enforcement of Maine's underage sales and smoke-free public place and workplace laws. And for these reasons, we urge you to vote ought not to pass on LD 1927. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Representative Chiazzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Schneider, for your testimony this morning. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I'm hearing from you is certainly public smoking the product in public is a concern. Would you have any concerns with any of the other forms that the product may come in, such as edible or some other form that is less intrusive, let's say, on the people around
I think by and large, our organization is marijuana use is, complicated one for our organization. As you know, I can provide you our position statement on medical marijuana. We do know there is evidence, as has been stated, and as your committee's aware of, cancer patients finding benefits sometimes through the use of medical marijuana. However, we don't support smoking marijuana for any use because of the health hazards as stated. So I think when you talk about things like edibles and tinctures and solves and those things, likely our organization would likely stay out of this bill if that was all that was involved. However, as I said, there's quite a significant overlap in the definition of tobacco products and marijuana products. That overlap is there on purpose and needs to be there. We do not support playing with those definitions or messing with them. And where there is overlap, we would certainly oppose off-premise sales of any sort of tobacco product because of the concerns we have with enforcing underage sale restrictions.
Thank you.
Senator Mirmont.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. So a couple of things. You testified that it would be hard to enforce age requirements. I used to own bars and restaurants, and it didn't seem hard to identify people who were appropriate age to buy alcohol. Now we have legal marijuana, whether it's medical or adult use, and they have to be identified by age. We also have certain products that go with the use of them that aren't used for other purposes unless they're taken into another realm, but they're by legal adults who fall under the program, and those people have to be identified. So maybe you should elaborate on why you think that people selling marijuana would suddenly be unable to appropriately check the age of the people buying. And I don't understand why you're thinking that if somebody is just there to make the product more available as a convenient way for the customer to buy it, that they don't already have something with them that they could be smoking if the rules allowed it, as opposed to they would only be able to smoke it if they could get it at that place. That's not making much sense to me. So that could be explained a little better. That'd be good. But I don't think this bill changes any prohibitions on where you can smoke from what I see reading it. Thank you.
I'd be happy to answer that question. Thank you for the question. So I think we believe that most businesses doing any type of business, most retailers are, try their best to comply with laws. However, we know that that's not always the case and it does not always happen. And so enforcement of our laws is incredibly important, especially for underage access to age restricted products. We know that the more we make products available, the more they are also available to kids. That's just, I don't think you can argue that. And as I said, if you look at the SINAR report, which is our youth tobacco underage sale inspection program, or one of the programs, as an important component of the inspection program is that there are inspectors that go out and check to make sure these retailers are complying with the law. And as I stated, they're due to COVID, also due to some of the changing laws and the licensing, there are significant challenges with that program right now, as reported in the annual report. And the other thing is that there are violations of that law. And as I stated, in 3 main counties, there were underage sale violations rates of about 9%. That to us is too high. And then when you look at the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey, 10% of older high school boys are reporting that they are purchasing they are getting tobacco products at retail sites. So we know that, so in other words, when you have these basically pop-up retail sites, our question is, and I don't know the answer to this, this would be a question for the Attorney General's office and the DHHS and the Office of Marijuana Policy, who all work together on our youth enforcement programs. But our question is, how is our underage sale restrictions going to be enforced in that pop-up environment? You're talking about retailers who are, you know, they're not visited a tremendous number of times anyway. And so we have concerns with kids being able to access those products by some retailers who aren't checking identification. That's usually what happens when they have violation rates. And at a time, as I said, when 1 in 3 Maine high school students are using tobacco products, at a time when our inspection program is already under having challenges, and at a time when the changes to our laws and policies have created additional challenges for this program. So we don't think it is the time to increase access in more areas to age-restricted programs and have potentially negative impacts on those enforcement programs.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
You may proceed.
Thank you. One of the things, I mean, the sponsor addressed the stigma of still having legal programs for both medical and recreational use marijuana. And in spite of that, the message that came through during legalization for both was that, well, I remember for personal experience being able to buy all the pot I wanted at 13. And because I lived on an Air Force base and the police on the Air Force base were just coming back from Thailand and Vietnam, they used to bring the most incredible strains and sell that. So we had that. And then when my kids were in school, they could get quite a range of everything in the school. So why we got this through was we moved it out of the hands of illicit dealers to a system that could be regulated, and people are able to check, and they are checked on. It's one of the complaints as chair of Marijuana Advisory Committee is how hard it is for them to do business for all the checking that goes on. And so most of what you're saying is not ringing true for what's actually happening out there. But I understand that you work for the Cancer Society, so that's going to be your testimony. But then trying to drag in products that are used for that market seems like really reaching, and statistics about smoking tobacco don't really answer that. So I forgot my question. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
I think my response would be, I'm citing data from the state's tobacco. I'm not stating anecdote, I'm citing data based on the youth inspection program of tobacco products. And there are products that overlap in that definition. And there are adult use retail marijuana sites being visited for underage sale tobacco product inspection. And there are violations at those sites. And I encourage you to ask the Attorney General's office to come present to your committee about the inspection programs and some of the challenges that they're facing.
Ms. Snyder, thank you for those statistics. I received a briefing from local public health advocates in Kennebec County, and I was not at all surprised with the latest statistics that youth consumption of cannabis products has decreased. Do your statistics say the same thing?
That youth consumption of cannabis has decreased?
Mm-hmm.
Well, my data is real. My area of expertise is around youth consumption of tobacco products. So you should ask that to somebody else.
Okay.
Again, my testimony is really around the overlap in the tobacco laws for product for retail sales. And then the other piece of this bill is related to smoking in public places of both products, which does not seem to be what most of the questions are about.
And did you hear the sponsor's testimony that
yes, I did.
Not Okay, prohibit any change or does not ask for any change in public consumption laws for tobacco or alcohol or anything else. Thank you. Representative Corey has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a very noisy dog, so you might hear her bark. And so I too have some of Senator Miramont's sort of concerns with regard to sort of underage use and everything. And I'd be really interested to see sort of like what the historical statistics are on that. When I was a kid, I smoked. Like I was able to walk into, a convenience store when I was 15 years old and buy a pack of cigarettes, even though, the age was, 18. The same sort of happened with alcohol when I went to college and everything, that people were less lax or more lax on those things. And I don't see that level of I feel like sort of carding people and age requirements, have been, sort of accepted by society. I go and I buy a 6-pack now at 47 and I get carded now. I'm not sure, I think we can point to some of the vaping and stuff like that. And I get that, and some of that may have to do with New Hampshire's laws. I don't know if they're still at, age 18. They're at 21 now as well.
The whole nation's at 21.
But I don't see that as a part of our culture anymore. I'd be very, interested to see, how things have changed over the last, 25 years from when I was a kid. But anyways, that's not my experience. I know you'll say it's anecdotal, but thank you.
Yeah, well, I would answer your question in a couple of ways. One is that, you'll never hear me say that there's a silver bullet response to tobacco control, right? You'll hear our organization say that it's a multi-pronged strategy of evidence-based strategies. And one of those evidence-based strategies is restriction of products to our youth. And we know enforcement of those laws is incredibly important. I mean, we know that when enforcement is scaled back, that violations increase. You could say when the cat's away, the mice will play. And I'm not saying that's every retailer, as I stated, most retailers, I believe, are doing their best to comply with the law. And I think some of the violation rates we are seeing now are due to confusion in the laws and a lack of understanding about of affected parties of the law. And so that is one of our concerns with this bill, is that we already have our work cut out for us to make sure any entity that is an outdoor eating establishment knows that it is an outdoor eating establishment and it is subject to Maine's smoke-free laws. We know that those marijuana retailers that sell tobacco products need to be licensed tobacco retailers, and there's confusion there. We know that there's work cut out from the state entities that are responsible for educating the affected parties to educate them. And so one of our reasons is when we have challenges with this level of affected parties knowing the laws. I mean, I hear all the time retailers talk about internet sales of tobacco products when all licensed tobacco retailers in Maine should know that it is against Maine law to sell tobacco products online. So when we have confusion among affected product entities of the laws and policies they need to follow, we do not believe it is the time to then change the laws and allow for more places where they can sell products. And again, enforcement of underage sales is a necessary component, and the violation rate in the past year has gone up, and that's incredibly concerning to us. So we do not believe it's the time to have new places that need to be inspected in new areas that pose challenges when you have a 3-day license. So now how are you inspecting to make sure that they are actually carding people in that temporary location for a temporary amount of time? You're basically expecting the regulated entity to regulate itself. And when we talk about, we know that from past history that expecting the tobacco industry to regulate themselves is not a good place to be.
Are there any other questions? So Ms. Snyder, my question is, the bill does not require off-premises sale of tobacco products, except for the fact that we define tobacco products to include things like rolling papers and pipes. But there's no data to suggest that with legalization of medical and adult use, that underage buyers are actually purchasing these things from regulated entities. So my question is, do you believe then that given that medical and adult use cannabis are legal in the state of Maine, that we need to revisit in statute the definition of tobacco products? Because your testimony focuses on cancer caused by tobacco products, but not cancer caused by cannabis products, which in fact treat cancer, as you said. So do we need to update the definition of tobacco products?
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, I want to make clear that my testimony never said that marijuana is used to treat cancer. That actually is not evidence-based. You know, there is marijuana is used to treat some side effects of cancer. I just want to be clear on that because I know there's confusion on that. I'm not suggesting you have confusion on that, Senator Hickman. And then I will say that my testimony does include concerns with carcinogens in secondhand marijuana smoke. And again, when I submit my testimony, you can see the links to that and the links to the CDC, US CDC's website on the health impacts of marijuana. And then my final question would be, I think I've made it clear that we do not wish the definition of tobacco products to be touched. We believe that it is accurately encompasses the products it needs to encompass. And then the other part I would say is I do cite data from the SINAR report, which is one of the main tobacco underage sale inspection reports that does show that youth are purchasing tobacco products or youth are having access to tobacco products in violation of Maine law underage. And that includes at marijuana retail establishments. And so I do think there is data that that youth are having access to tobacco products under the age of 21 in some of our retail establishments, as cited by the violation rate in the SINAR report and in the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey, where 10% of those older male youth high school students are saying that they are getting access to tobacco products at retail establishments.
Thank you for that clarity. But you told me that I should ask someone who tracks data on the purchase by underage people of cannabis products, which even though there's an overlap in the paraphernalia for each product, you don't have data to suggest that underage people are buying cannabis because it's more available at the retail establishments where it is legally sold. I guess I'm just trying to understand that from you.
Yeah, no, I think, and I thank you for the clarity. I'm just want to make sure I get all the points. That is not, again, our area of expertise in terms of retail sales of products has to do with tobacco products. So I'm not the one to ask the question about what you would have to ask somebody else, like the Public Health Association, about youth access to marijuana or the Office of Marijuana Policy about how they are doing underage sales enforcement, which I know is much more challenging for the marijuana program because they cannot use federal resources. The FDA is also one of the programs that they do for tobacco inspections, and they use FDA, and my understanding is they can't use FDA money for tobacco enforcement to do enforcement in where there is overlap.
Yes, thank you. The director of the Office of Marijuana Policy will be here to testify later. I appreciate you being here. If there are no other questions, thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And with that, I will call upon Jamie to speak next. I do not want to mispronounce your last name, so I will ask you to say it into the record. Please introduce yourself, tell us who you are representing, and the Zoom is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator Hickman. My name is Jamie Cotnoir, and I am the Associate Director for the Division of Disease Prevention at Maine CDC. Senator Hickman, Representative Chiazzo, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. As I stated, my name is Jamie Cottonwar, and I am with the Maine Center for Disease Control and Prevention. I am here today to provide testimony on behalf of the Department of Health and Human Services, Maine CDC, and will be speaking against LD 1927, an act to authorize certain off-premise sales of adult use marijuana. This bill authorizes the Department of Administrative and Financial Services to issue permits to its marijuana stores licensees for the off-premise sale of adult use marijuana or adult use marijuana products, notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary, and provide certain limitations on those permits. Under this legislation, marijuana store licensees must obtain approval from the municipality in which the event is located prior to applying for this permit. This bill also requires staffs to develop guidance documents for compliance with such permits and to adopt routine technical rules for the administration of the permits. The Maine CDC opposes LD 1927, which, if enacted, has the potential to impact the substance use prevention efforts at the state and local level and to weaken policies established to protect public health. Currently, under DAF's adult use marijuana program rule, a marijuana product is defined as a product composed of marijuana or marijuana concentrate and other ingredients that is intended for use or consumption, including but not limited to, an edible marijuana product, a marijuana ointment, and a marijuana tincture. A licensed marijuana store is authorized to sell adult use marijuana products and marijuana paraphernalia to adults aged 21 and older. Additionally, a marijuana establishment licensee may be required to obtain a separate food establishment license from the state of Maine pursuant to Title 22, Section 2167, and the Maine CDC may require a retail tobacco license for establishments selling tobacco products, such as pipes, rolling papers, etc., whether intended for tobacco use or for the purpose of administering marijuana. The Maine CDC Tobacco and Substance Use Prevention and Control Program works to prevent underage misuse and use of substances and to delay onset of the first use for as long as possible in the lifespan. Increasing access and visibility of substances such as marijuana normalizes use, which ultimately increases both use and misuse. According to the 2019 Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey, or the MIAS, more than 1 in 5 high school students in Maine report using marijuana in the past 30 days. Additionally, over half of high school students currently believe it is easy to obtain marijuana. Those who believed marijuana was easy to obtain were more than 9 times as likely to use it in the past 30 days as compared to their peers who thought marijuana was difficult to obtain. Maine also has the second highest rate of young adult, age 18 to 25, marijuana consumption in the nation at 48.63% using it in the past 30 days. Multiple public health concerns exist when considering whether to allow off-premise licensees to sell adult use marijuana at events. Research shows that exposure to marijuana sales within a person's physical environment may be associated with increased use. As public health has witnessed with tobacco and alcohol sales, physical availability in one's environment increases exposure to environmental cues, which promote the use of the substance. Community level risk factors for initiating and continuing use of marijuana include widespread availability of marijuana and greater marijuana outlet density, both of which would be directly impacted if LD 1927 were to pass. Early use of marijuana increases the risk of developing serious mental health problems, including anxiety, depression, and psychotic disorders, and the risk of these mental health outcomes is heightened with the consumption of marijuana containing THC content more than 10%. According to a 2020 study, 95% of marijuana sold in Maine contains at least 10% THC. LD 1927 does not specify the types of events where marijuana sales would potentially be allowable. Conducting sales of marijuana products in public events where youth, young adults, or individuals in recovery are spending recreational time not only increases visibility, but also promotes the idea that using marijuana is necessary to have fun and reduces the perception of harm related to use. While consumption of adult use marijuana is legal in Maine for citizens aged 21 and older, studies have shown that a person's brain is not fully developed until age 25, meaning they are more vulnerable during this young adult stage. With no parameters in this legislation for events that may be considered by municipalities for these licensees, there is potential that alcohol sales and consumption would be co-occurring at the same event, which creates a separate concern for public health and safety. LD 1927 poses a potential concern in terms of enforcement as well, which directly impacts youth and young adult consumption rates. Although this bill states it would allow for adult use marijuana and adult use marijuana products, while prohibiting consumption of marijuana and marijuana products at the location of the sale of the event, the language in this bill is unclear on whether consumption would be allowed separate from the physical location of the retail sale area at the event. Marijuana products exist in several forms and involve multiple potential routes of administration. And while smoking and vaping may be prohibited, consumption of other marijuana products, including edibles, drinks, etc., would likely be much more difficult to monitor and enforce at public events. The burden of enforcing these factors would likely fall on local law enforcement. Selling marijuana products at events where alcohol sales are also allowed will likely lead to use of both products together. Recent studies demonstrate that simultaneous alcohol and marijuana use results in significant negative consequences of use, including driving under the influence, blackouts, engaging in risky behaviors, and cognitive effects, more so than when alcohol or marijuana are used alone. Following alcohol, marijuana is the substance most often associated with impaired driving. Marijuana use slows reaction time, impairs coordination, and distorts perception. And driving following the use of marijuana is as dangerous as with alcohol consumption, and even more so when consumed simultaneously. This is a risk to public safety and could place additional burdens on law enforcement. In summary, Maine CDC opposes LD 1927 and respectfully requests the committee vote ought not to pass. LD 1927 would increase the risk of early initiation of marijuana use and misuse, decrease the perceptions of harm related to use, and increase the risk of individuals operating under the influence of marijuana, while also creating several challenges related to enforcement, each of these factors being of great concern to the public health and safety of Maine citizens. Thank you for your consideration of this matter and for the opportunity to provide testimony today. I can address questions from the committee and I will be available to participate at the work session.
Thank you, Ms. Tatnois. Representative Corey has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. If say this were like 20 years ago and we were sort of talking about, the same with alcohol, which has a lot of, similar, concerns, maybe at least, concerns that you've stated, to marijuana, would the CDC's testimony be the same with regard to, the sale of, alcohol outside of a store, exposure to, youth, sort of in all of that, or is it just marijuana?
I can't speak to hypothetical positions by the department.
Sure, we can ask hypothetical questions.
Sorry.
So that's the answer, just
Yeah.
Hypothetical. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Representative Chiazzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to spark a debate, but so I'll keep my question brief. Ms. Cotmore, thank you for your testimony this morning. Is there any trackable data that the Maine CDC can provide this committee in terms of youth purchase and use rates from youths that we might be able to take into consideration as we consider this legislation? I know you mentioned some statistics about snapshots. I'm interested in some trending. We've talked about, is the rate decreasing, increasing? Is there any statistical information that the department can provide us that can alleviate some of those debates about trending?
Absolutely, sir. I can get that for you in advance of the work session.
Excellent. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here today. Next up, we have Director Eric Gunderson from the Office of Marijuana Policy to testify against LD 1927. Director Gunderson, the floor is yours.
There we go. Good morning, everybody. Senator Hickman, Representative Chiazzo, members of the VLA committee. My name is Eric Gunderson. I'm director of the Office of Marijuana Policy, and I'm here today to provide testimony on behalf of our office in opposition to LD 1927. Certainly, OMP is supportive of efforts that seek to expand access to adult use cannabis for interested consumers 21 and older. Increasing access to a regulated marketplace helps to diminish the illicit or traditional market that has been prevalent in Maine for decades. We believe, however, that LD 1927 would harm these efforts by making municipalities less receptive to this relatively new industry and would undermine security and advertising standards in present law today. Entities seeking to conduct retail sales in our adult use marketplace may only conduct those sales from brick and mortar stores in communities which had firmly opted in by vote of their legislative bodies. LD 1927 does not amend the opt-in standard, but would rather allow for pop-up stores with municipal approval in a community which has not allowed for retail operations of adult use stores. Furthermore, the proposal does not attempt to define what form of municipal approval would be appropriate for the department to accept. The off-premise sales of adult use marijuana would further frustrate efforts in current law designed to limit exposure of minors to cannabis. For example, Maine law prohibits the consumption of any form of cannabis in public. It also prohibits marketing and advertising that has a high likelihood of reaching those 21 and under. Adult use retailers are also subject to security standards and were, until very recently, required to verify customers' identification outside of their retail marijuana establishment. Yet this legislation would allow for the sale of adult use cannabis in venues frequented by minors, likely in plain view of those same individuals, and where the consumption of those same products is strictly prohibited. The negative consequences and public health outcomes resulting from this could have serious effects on other communities which are currently considering opting in for the adult use program and have long-term implications for responsible consumers who are a significant distance from a community which allows for retail sales. The office believes that at present, the best way to support Maine's nascent adult use industry is to support communities throughout Maine, which are continuing to have these opt-in discussions. In addition to significant additional administrative challenges, nothing in this bill would address the inevitable public health consequences of sales of cannabis at county fairs, music festivals, sporting events, and the possibility for marijuana-specific events and festivals, whether that be increase in access to cannabis of people under 21, increased public consumption of adult use cannabis at such events, or the increased incidence of consumers driving under the influence of cannabis. We've had these discussions with the CDC, and obviously Julie just spoke with you. They share many of our same concerns. As an agency, the office certainly does not have the tools or resources to address these numerous challenges. And with that, we thank the committee for consideration of this bill and are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Director. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, we will certainly ask for your participation in the work session when we get to it, sir.
Certainly be there. Thank you.
Thank you. I do not have anyone else signed up who is present to testify in opposition to this bill. If there's anyone present who wishes to do so, please raise your hand at this time. Is there anyone present who wishes to testify neither for nor against this legislation? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing on LD 1927. Continuing in the same vein, I will now open the public hearing on LD 1930, resolved regarding legislative review of portions of Chapter 1 Adult Use Marijuana Program Rule and Major Substantive Rule of the Department of Administrative and Financial Services, Office of Marijuana Policy. I do believe that we have received this. I don't know if we've received the actual language of the rule, but with all that being said, Director Gunderson is still here. And I'm going to ask him to present these rules. Our former Senator, Chair, Senator Lucchini is not here. He would say the same thing if he were. This is a department bill, of course, because it is a legislative statutory requirement that these rules come to us for major substantive review. So with that, Director Gunderson, the floor is yours again. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Hello again. Senator Hickman, Representative Chiazzo, members of the VLA committee. My name is Eric Gunderson, of course, Director of the Office of Marijuana Policy. And I'm here today to provide testimony on behalf of our office in support of LD 1930, the revised adult use rules that have been provisionally adopted by our office. This provisionally adopted rule represents a good faith effort on our office to incorporate the lessons that we've learned since these regulations were initially adopted in November 2019. When we began this round of rulemaking, OMP made it clear to our stakeholders that we wanted to work with them to simplify the rule with the goal of reducing the administrative and regulatory burdens of the program. We think the rule before you does just that while maintaining the high standards that we've set for protecting public health and safety. As with our previous major substantive rulemaking, we began this process by publicizing an informal discussion draft that incorporated lessons learned since the launch of the program, particularly since the beginning of retail sales in October 20. These lessons learned through many discussions with our licensees and other stakeholders and are reflected in the guidance documents published by OMP intended to provide consistent understanding how the office interprets and enforces various aspects of rule and law. We then gave stakeholders the opportunity to meet with us one-on-one to provide their feedback on this discussion draft. Once those meetings were complete, OMP made revisions to the discussion draft and subsequently began the MAPA process by formally proposing revisions to the adult use rule. The proposed rule incorporates the feedback from those informal discussions, guidance that we had issued during the first year of the program, and statutory changes of the MLA that have been made since November of 19. As a result of that collaborative process, OMP published a proposed rule that received comparably little substantive feedback. The message we received that in light of these changes we made to the rule, removing standard operating procedure disclosure requirements, doing away with hours of operation of retail sales, and simplifying the information and materials requested to be provided during the application process, among others. We had produced a rule that our licensees, for the most part, were comfortable with, and that would allow us to continue our mission of ensuring health and safety for all Mainers by effectively and responsibly licensing and regulating marijuana establishments. While you may hear some concerns regarding the provisions adopted in these regulations, we're confident that we can work with those testifying in this committee to address those concerns and finalize the rule over the coming weeks. With that, I thank the committee for their consideration and am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director. Are there any questions from the committee about the rule? Representative Chiazzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director Gunderson, for your testimony this morning, for kicking us off in Senator Lucchini's continued absence. Quick question. So I know section 1, chapter 1 has got multiple sections to it, and I apologize, I should probably know this, but I'm confused about which ones are open to review, which ones we're talking about, and maybe Sam can address this as part of the work session as well. But I'm wondering if there are specific sections that are not subject to review, or however we want to differentiate that. So I know it's not the entire chapter 1, or at least my understanding is it's not the entire chapter 1, it's portions of it. So I guess I would ask you, would you like to provide that, or should we defer to the analysts for that?
It's my understanding that the rule that we've provided to you, everything in that rule is major substantive. Those pieces in the adult use program that remain routine technical were not part of this major substantive rulemaking. And Sam, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
This is the public hearing portion of our testimony.
Oh,
and
sorry.
For that reason, we don't tend to ask the analyst to respond. I can say that the analyst has put into our chat function a link to the provisionally adopted rule for all of our review. And we still have people to testify on the rule coming before us. So if there are no other questions from Director Gunderson from the committee, we will certainly see you at the work session, where I'm sure between now and then we'll have lots of questions. So with that, I am going to continue with testimony in favor of the rule. I have one person signed up, Melina Dumas. If I'm saying that incorrectly, I apologize. I will promote Melina to the panel now to provide testimony to the committee in favor of LD 1930, this major substantive rule. Good afternoon. We have passed noon. Good afternoon, and the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Senator Hickman, Representative Chiazzo, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. My name is Melina Dumas. I'm an attorney with the law firm Drummond Woodson in Portland. I'm here today on behalf of Maine Organic Therapy, one of the registered dispensaries in Maine, and Curaleaf Maine, which has several active and pending adult use licenses. We're in support of the resolve and the legislature's authorization for this major substantive rule to be finally adopted by DAFs. The rule includes a number of important clarifications to help facilitate compliance with the laws governing the adult use marijuana program and streamlines a number of processes based on lessons learned since the program's launch. While the update is generally helpful and workable, and we really appreciate OMP's collaboration with stakeholders throughout the process, we wanted to provide public comment in the hope that the committee will direct the department to make substantive changes in just a few minor areas. So our largest concern has to do with restrictions around co-locating medical and adult use marijuana businesses. There's a new definition of co-location in the rule that requires co-located licensees to share identical ownership with the co-located entity. Given that registered caregiver entities must be owned and managed by a single individual, the registered caregiver, this requirement is unworkable. There are also different restrictions on ownership and management of adult use marijuana businesses. For example, residency requirements and disqualifying violations when you compare them to caregivers and dispensaries. The department's position has previously been that the entities must share an owner or principal, but not that the entities must have identical ownership or that the entities holding the licenses and registrations need to be the same. And that goes for the plant transfer authorization as well as co-location of facilities. So our recommendation would be for the committee to direct the department to amend any section of the rule that currently requires identical ownership of co-located licenses or otherwise indicates that the same individuals or entities must hold those licenses. Instead, the rule should be clear that the businesses can co-locate so long as they share a common owner or a common officer, director, manager, or general partner. This aligns with the intent of the statute to allow co-location of medical and adult use marijuana businesses. The current language would effectively preclude caregivers from locating with their adult use licenses and create other complications. The rule also indicates that if both medical and adult use marijuana are being manufactured or cultivated in a building, then an adult use marijuana store cannot be cited in that building. We do not see such a prohibition in the statute, and therefore we don't think that the department has the authority to impose this additional restriction. It would likely impact existing operations or planned operations where the locations build out is already underway. So we would recommend striking that particular prohibition. So I'm going to rush through my other comments for the sake of time, but we would recommend a change to include other professionals like insurance providers, lawyers, and accountants to the list of authorized visitors that can enter limited access areas subject to the existing parameters in the rule. And finally, we see some challenges with the language around equipment rating and approvals, in particular for marijuana stores. For stores, there's now language prohibiting, quote, the use of any electrical equipment, including but not limited to display lighting, not listed as approved by a nationally recognized testing laboratory or not approved by the authority having jurisdiction. While electrical equipment must be safe, the way this currently works is that either a municipality conducts inspections and issues a certificate of occupancy, documenting that electrical wiring is up to code, or an electrician submits a letter to that effect. So this would create unnecessary complications. And I know I've run out of time. The only final comment I make on equipment ratings is that we want to make sure that the rule where it refers to agency approved, including UL, ETL, and CSA ratings, is an illustrative list so that there might be other approval ratings that are sufficient for major equipment and cultivation and manufacturing facilities. And we understand why it's important to have that information for those facilities for major equipment, but we just want to make sure it doesn't create unnecessary burden on the licensees. Okay, I'm sorry, I went slightly over time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Musk. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here today.
Thanks so much.
Next up, we have Mr. Joel Pepin, who is testifying in favor of LD 1930, and he just signed up to testify. The floor is yours, sir.
Hello, Senator Hickman and the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. I did make a mistake in my registration, and I meant to select not opposed. So I'm more than happy to hold my testimony.
Thank you. That might not be necessary because I do not believe there is anyone else signed up to testify in favor of LD 1930. And if I'm incorrect, please raise your hand if you are in the attendee room. So seeing none, we will take testimony. Yes, I apologize, Mr. Pepin. I will leave you here, but we're going to turn to testimony in opposition to LD 1930. So Mr. Pepin, if you could please turn off your camera for the time being, that would be great. And let me promote first Mr. Matthew Bayless to the room, who will be the first person to testify against. Mr. Scott Howard will be next. Mr. Bayless, if you are here, may turn on your camera. And you have your 3 minutes. Please introduce yourself and the floor is yours.
Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Kiazu, and distinguished members of the VLA committee. My name is Matt Bayless. I'm founder of GELA and a member of the Maine Cannabis Industry Association Legislative Committee. GELA is a small self-funded adult use cultivator operating 875 square feet of flowering canopy in South Portland. I'm here before you today to testify in opposition of the proposed adult use rules. GELA was one of the very first adult use licensees issued in Maine, and from that point forward, I've been adamant that OMP's regulatory structure is designed and built for scale and will suffocate smaller businesses that cannot afford a full-time compliance department. GELA had a warm and collaborative relationship with OMP in the early days of the program, and my feedback was always received in a positive manner and met with reassurance that the program would be modified and made more user-friendly. In April of 2020, Director Gunderson, on a call with MCIA, said that over the summer, we would be involved in discussions to make adult use more user-friendly. During those discussions, we voiced our concerns about metric, testing redundancies, costly camera and hard drive requirements, and OMP's ultimate and unchecked authority to revoke or suspend licenses without due process. When the proposed rules were released last September, I was not only disappointed. As a stakeholder that negotiated in good faith, I felt that I had been misled and used. There were a handful of small improvements made in the rules, but the major mechanical flaws in the system were untouched. In fact, OMP added more draconian oversight by requiring operators to submit SOPs. I believe in oversight and regulation in the cannabis industry, but why should our camera requirements be greater than that which is required by pharmacies and banks? Why shouldn't our advertising regulations be in line with the alcohol industry? And how can a tier 1 cultivator generate enough revenue to purchase the equipment and hire enough personnel that is necessary to stay compliant? I've paid $6,000 in licensing fees, over $150,000 in excise tax, $20,000 on camera and hard drives, and now I employ 14 people to run my company to stay within the lines. And still every day I'm filled with paranoia and anxiety that my license can be revoked for something as trivial as a clerical error. I ask this committee to reject the proposed rules before you today in its entirety and focus on the bills that are before this committee right now that will provide a path forward towards a more manageable regulatory structure. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions if you guys have.
Thank you, Mr. Bayless. Are there any questions from the committee? Representative Supika.
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony today. You said submit SOBs. I didn't know what that acronym meant. I'm sorry, I'm new to the legislature. What does that mean?
Well, not SOB.
Oh, that's what I wrote down. I apologize.
That may come up in other conversations. SOP, standards of practice, standards of protocol. So basically, that's our IP. That's how I make my formulas to feed the plants. That's all my environments, how I do my magic. OMP has no authority to even define what an SOP is. And, there's a lot of worries that those could be taken and used by people that leave the department and go back in the private industry. Now, I believe that has been stricken from the proposed rules before you today, but it was part of that first draft. So
thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
Representative Chiazzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bayless, for your testimony this afternoon. And remind me again, and I apologize, do you have operations in both medical and adult, or is it strictly adult at this point?
I do have a caregiver license. I'm too busy with adult use right now to utilize that. That's just the way it is. But I have been a registered caregiver for 8 years, and I believe very strongly in the medical program.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Bayless, I think I heard you say that the department can revoke or suspend a license without any appeals process. Is that what I heard you say?
Yes, sir. That's a fact. I'd really, I think it'd be great if the VLA committee dug into that whole suspension and revocation section of the rules and regulations, because it's literally a whack-a-mole game of walking a tightrope on a tightrope on a tightrope. And then once you read through all the sections, the last bit in there is just like, well, we can pretty much decide to revoke or suspend your license for whatever reason we see fit. And there's no due process. And for cultivation, if you revoke my license and lock me out of my building, I'm bankrupt. My plants are done in less than 24 hours. My 14 employees are out of jobs.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Bayless from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here today and providing your testimony. Next up will be Mr. Scott Hayward, and I am going to ask him to please turn your video back on. I did disable it for a moment. I do ask everyone to leave your video off until you are called upon to speak, even if I promote you to panelists. Thank you for your cooperation. Mr. Howard, the floor is yours. Please introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and you may begin.
Senator Hickman, and represent Chiazo and members of the VLA committee. My name is Scott Howard. I live in Pownell, Maine. I operate Seaweed Co. We are an adult use retail facility and an adult use manufacturing facility. I will be brief here because I need to get back to work because running an adult use store is very challenging in this environment. I support a regulated market that is composed of track and trace and testing. I oppose the new rules as it's presented. We need to refine the rules that are in place before we agree to new ones. We brought some suggestions to you folks a week or so ago, and the rules currently, as they represent only minor administrative adjustments, do not address the systemic inefficiencies inherent to the existing rules. So I would speak in opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Are there any questions from the committee? Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to provide your insight on this. Representative McCrae, did I see? Okay, no problem. Next up, we will have Mr. Alex McMahon. Please turn on your video, sir, and your microphone. Introduce yourself, and the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Senator Hickman, Representative Chiazo, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. My name is Alex McMahon. I live in Lewiston, and I'm a co-owner of Medco and a member of the NCIA Legislative Committee. I'm here today to speak in opposition of the proposed adult use rules. There are significant issues with the adult use program that should be addressed before such an impactful piece of legislation is passed. A handful of these issues are already being discussed by the committee. Therefore, it only makes sense that the new rules should be put on pause in order to consider how the rules fit in with the current bills on the table and with the other concerns from the industry. At the launch of the adult use program, I didn't think metric would be too bad. The training was simple enough with relatively low inventory. I didn't think the workload seemed too bad at first. As the inventory, batches, transfers, and tags started to pile up in the system, the burden became evident, and I realized that I was wrong. The amount of work required to maintain compliance and metric is simply too much and completely disproportionate to any other industry. Not only that, but a slight slip up can be nearly impossible to correct. The rules in general need a lot more work, with more insight provided by the members of the industry who are working under the regulations of the current rules day in and day out. Please consider postponing adoption of the proposed adult use rules so that the industry may continue to work with the legislature to fix some of the major existing issues before moving any further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McMahon. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here today, sir. Is there anyone else present who wishes to testify in opposition? I believe Mr. Jay Nutting is here for that purpose. Please turn on your mic and your video, sir, if you wish to, and you may begin.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. Senator Hickman, Representative Chiazo, members of the committee, my name is Jay Nutting. I'm employed by Main Street Solutions. I'm a resident of Vassabro. I'm here today to provide testimony on behalf of the Maine Cannabis Industry Association. We hope that the Office of Marijuana Policy and the members of the committee know that the members of the Maine Cannabis Industry Association have been steadfast in our support of a regulated adult use marijuana program. Our members are here from day one, working with the Joint Standing Marijuana Implementation Committee both years, and fought hard to override a governor's veto to assure that Maine's adult use marijuana program was safe for our communities with tested and tracked marijuana, and most importantly, with IDs being checked to verify the age of consumers. Some of you, and we certainly hope the Office of Marijuana Policy might know, that we have at times been singularly supportive of a regulated system and the office's work. It is difficult for us to say as an association that the provisionally adopted rule feels like an affront to the work we have done and the support we have shown. While our members support a regulated program, we also suffer the very worst of it. And the office does not seem to have concern for our ability to compete with the unregulated illegal marijuana market. That is a market where anything goes. No IDs are checked, no taxes collected, no consumer safety measures are in place. And it is at most dangerous, and where other illegal drugs are sometimes. Nearly 100 years of prohibition in this country have provided conclusively that illegal marijuana sales cannot be enforced out of our communities. It can only be displayed with regulated, with regulated access that offers consumers a net win. We are the front line in the battle to accomplish regulated access. Perhaps the most troubling aspect of the provisional rule is not what was changed, but what wasn't changed. These rules were prepared by the office, who just last session sat before this very committee and had almost identical rules rejected on the grounds that they were draconian and overly burdensome. The legislature made the determination that the rules proposed for the medical program would prevent legal businesses from competing with illegal businesses, and that a marijuana program did not need to be prohibitively regulated for it to be safe for our communities. MCIA asked the committee to please recognize that these overburdensome rules are our rules. We live them every day, and the experience to confirm that they are prohibitive. On the medical side, OMP was directed to hold a working group of medical marijuana operators to discuss the issues facing the regulated market. MCIA was proud to have 2 of our members be part of that working group. The office has released a report stating that the results of the working group were consensus around the tracking and testing practices proposed by the office. These are the very issues raised by MCIA on multiple calls with OMP over the summer, when they were supposedly seeking our input on the proposed rule for the adult use program. And still, after that, there seems to be a total disregard for these concerns. In statute, the office is granted broad authority to implement both tracking and testing practices for this program. Tracking and testing were challenges facing the regulated market that the office could have addressed without change to statute through this very rulemaking process. But they failed.
Your time has come to an end. I will ask you to wrap up, and I'm sure that there may be some questions from the committee for you.
Absolutely. I think we'll end with that, and just also wanted to ask the committees to at a minimum pause these rules while you consider 3, and I think another one coming, 4 pieces of legislation that could significantly impact the rules currently before you. So it certainly makes sense for you all to deliberate those laws and hopefully act on those statutes before anything is done with this rule. So I'll close with that.
Thank you, Mr. Nunning. Are there any questions from the committee? Representative McCray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Nutting. I don't want to be repetitious, but if you have anybody, you or others who came before you, have specifics, there's things that it sounds like there are things that you're okay with and things that you're not. And I hear you that the bills that we're considering are some of those things, but are there other specifics that you're concerned about? I also hear you saying wait. So any information you want to add in between would be helpful to me.
Yes, I'll see if we can come up with a list. I mean, I think you've heard some already today. The SOPs is one of them, and unfortunately, a lot of the issues are addressed with some of the pieces of legislation we brought forward to help bring forward this session. But I'll see if I can create a comprehensive list for you, or the association can, and we'll sure that's before you.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Nutting, I certainly have heard testimony from you on behalf of the industry throughout this process. And I think I would simply like for you to, if you will, in less than a minute or so, the part of your testimony that made my ears wake up was you felt as though even though you support a regulated industry and you always have, that this particular batch of rules feels like, to quote you, an affront to the industry. Would you care to explicate on that for a minute or so?
Well, I can attempt to, Mr. Chair. I mean, I think this testimony was kind of a culmination of all the members' thoughts. So it's difficult to pull out, you know, one specific issue or example. But I think the affront is more of the communication, which has been great and back and forth throughout this process, and voicing concerns that we have had. And I think even some acknowledgement from the office that, yes, that there probably needs to be some changes, as a previous testimony said, to make it quote unquote more user friendly. And we just do not believe that occurred in these provisional rules. So if you keep having these conversations and nothing changes, and then, I mean, that's an affront. I mean, I know of people who have were in the medical world and then switched to adult use and have gone back to medical. That should be a bellwether, I think, for everyone. Why? I think that's because adult use has been incredibly overburdensome thus far and very difficult to operate in.
Thank you, Mr. Nunning. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, we look forward to more input from you between now and in the work session or during the work session on these rules, and of course, in all the other bills before us on adult use and medical. Are there any other people who are here to testify in opposition to these rules that have not signed up to do so? If not, I will now move to testimony neither for nor against. And it looks like we have two people who are testifying from that posture, Mr. Joe Pepin and Mr. Paul McCarrier. Unless, Mr. Pepin, are you testifying? And it doesn't matter, your testimony is in front of us. Whatever position you take, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Senator Hickman. And to be clear, I am testifying in opposition of the proposed rule.
Okay, then you go for it.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Hickman, Representative Chiazzo, and distinguished members of the Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. I'm Joel Pepin, co-founder of JAR Cannabis Company. JAR is a locally owned, vertically integrated business operating in both the medical and adult use programs here in the state of Maine. I oppose the adoption of the proposed adult use rules, and I believe they failed to move forward on critical issues plaguing the adult use cannabis industry, mainly the failed metric track and trace system and the overburdensome testing regulations. Since the VLA committee is actively considering legislation sponsored by Representative Speaker and Representative Perry, also would soon additional testimony from Representative Chiazzo, I think the proposed rules before you are premature. We are hopeful they will be obsolete after committee works the legislation this coming Friday. Director Gunderson has said in the past that OMP will use data-driven decisions when addressing regulatory changes to Maine's marijuana programs. And I'd like to ask, what problems exist in the marketplace that this proposed rule would fix? I personally am not aware of any issues that currently exist that would also be alleviated if these rules were adopted, speaking as a vertically integrated operator. So with that in mind, and discussions we've had with OMP, I would urge the committee to focus on the following. As you all are aware, metric, we don't believe tagging individual plants makes sense. It's much more appropriate to tag cultivation by batches. Tracking an individual plant no way represents accurate yield per light or per square foot of canopy space. I thought it was interesting during her recent testimony on track and trace, Gabby Pierce from OMP suggested that metric was tracking the conditions of production and cultivation, which is not true, meaning environmental, light, that type of thing. She also suggested that OMP was having trouble with some quirks in the system. In my opinion, there are no quirks. It's just a burdensome process, which quite frankly is not user-friendly. For example, if an operator makes a mistaken keystroke, there's no way to immediately fix the problem. It results in inventory staying on the shelf and not being brought to retail stores until there are several extended conversations between both Metric and OMP, which can easily take 24 to 72 hours or more to resolve. In my understanding, there's no inventory system in the private sector that works this way. I think Maine must do better. We've also had a lot of talks with OMP around testing. It's cumbersome, and it would remain so under the proposed rule. Obviously, testing exists to protect consumers, and as an operator, I'm for testing. To achieve that, I believe testing should be conducted once immediately prior to the product entering the marketplace. I believe it's obvious that OMP does have the authority to fix the over-testing of product, but this rule fails to make the proper changes. Based on discussions I've had personally with various OMP officials, I was expecting content in this proposed rule that would make business more efficient for operators. And in my opinion, I can identify one component of these rules that are business friendly from an operator standpoint. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee for Mr. Pepin? Seeing none, thank you for being here today, sir. And if we have any questions between now and the work session, I'm sure we will reach out to you. I see that there is an attendee with her hand raised. Alicia Melnick, are you here to testify in opposition to the bill? I will allow you to do so as I promote you to panelist. Good afternoon and welcome back.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm blinded. My name is Alicia Melnick, and thank you so much, Senator Hickman and Representative Chiazzo and other members of the VLA committee for allowing me to chime in. I just wanted to echo that as, again, someone who was very involved in passing of the adult use law and who's been involved in the changes over the years in laws and rules to both industries, that I would encourage you to take a pause, as folks have said, and really take a look at things like metric and surveillance requirements or recommendations by the department. I think what I just want to say is that lower market barriers to participation actually help us ensure that the regulated, taxed market is the market that is utilized by people who want to consume marijuana, consume cannabis in the state of Maine, whether that's the adult use market or through the medical market. And some of the continued proposals in the rules just raise those barriers in ways, again, that push especially the medium and smaller participants out of the market, and either only allow for the really large participants to engage in the market, or really just allow for the illicit market to flourish. So I just wanted to appreciate you all for digging into this. There's a lot before you in both the adult use and the medical industries, but I think this continues to be the reason why it's so important for you as the legislature to be involved in shaping the regulatory process. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Melnick. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, is there anyone else present who wishes to testify in opposition to LG 1920? With that, we will move to testimony neither for nor against, and Mr. Paul McCarrier is here. I will ask him to turn on his video. Mr. McCarrier, the floor is yours, and please unmute yourself as well.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul T. McCarrier. I helped write question 1, and I've been involved with medical cannabis and cannabis policy since 2010. I'm from Belfast, Maine, and I'm also a member of the Maine Craft Cannabis Association. I think everything that has been said before you is true, and I think it's one of the reasons why I can speak personally to why I have not joined the adult use program, is because there is such a high barrier to entry. There is such a risk that you will not be able to make a business out of this, and there is so much uncertainty. The anxiety that Mr. Bayless spoke about not knowing if you're going to be able to have your business at the end of the day, to not knowing if you're going to be locked out of it, is something that many in the medical cannabis field feel is coming with the proposed rules on the medical side. The reason I bring this up is because the adult use rules, while they have become seemingly better with this last draft, are still very cumbersome and still tend to favor large out-of-state companies, which is not the intent of the voters. It was not the intent of the thousands of people I spoke to who signed the initiative back in 2015, and I don't believe it's the intent of the legislature. With that being said, I think OMP is doing the best job that they can. The problem that I see is I think they're getting the wrong advice. With that being said, I think that the Veteran Legal Affairs Committee and the larger legislature needs to have a larger oversight role and needs to have more control over this program in general, and needs to start deciding who these stakeholders are to listen to when we're coming up with rules that regulate the program. With that being said, the idea that rules, since they're major substantive, need to be approved by this committee, I feel like the legislature should have to approve any rules before they go into effect. And I believe that is within your power, as has been done with the mining bill that happened, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago. With that being said, I will again just emphasize that we are small businesses here in the state of Maine. We employ local people, and that the more burdensome these rules are, is the more difficult it will make us to remain in business here and not be run by large out-of-state interests. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. McCarrier. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for participating today.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else present who wishes to testify on LD 1930? Seeing no hands raised, I will close the public hearing. Our next scheduled work session is a reconsideration, I do believe, and it will be at 1 o'clock. Sam, do you have anything for us between now and then regarding any of the work that we have heard today?
Not unless anyone has questions for me. And I'll, yeah.
Representative Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I checked for the bill analysis on that reconsideration in our committee files. Has it been put there so I could go ahead and give it a read, or is it?
It's actually under the wrong bill. I noticed earlier when I was looking at the committee file for the bill we just heard. I think it's in the wrong bill. Maybe well, let's put it this way. I saw the director's testimony in the wrong place. So I do know that we received the bill analysis from Janet in the committee materials. So you should have that in an email, but if Janet is here.
I can also provide it online. It's technically mine, but Janet did email it last night.
She did email it. I saw that. I just noticed that something from the director was in the wrong bill on the committee files. But so Representative Corey, can someone put in the chat just so that it's right in front of us? Because I know that this is Representative Corey's issue mostly, unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, my goal is just to read it really quick while we're on sort of the break and to make this as quick as painless as possible right after the break.
So with that said, we will take a recess until 1 o'clock and we will come back and have the work session reconsideration on LD 1743. Thank you all very much for your patience. Sam, can you tell me what date this bill was previously voted?
Yes, let me pull it up just a moment because I don't quite remember on the top of my head. I believe it was January 10th.
Thank you.
Which was the same day as the public hearing.
Yeah. My clock says that it is 1:00 p.m. So if committee members can please turn on their cameras so I know if we have a quorum or not. Looks like we do. Welcome back to the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. We have one item of business before we adjourn for the day, a nice short day. We all appreciate that, I'm sure. And so we are proposing to do a reconsideration of a bill that was previously voted on January 10th. And so in order to move into work session, I would need a motion to reconsider. Representative Chiazzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having voted with the prevailing side of ought to pass, I wish to motion to reconsider my vote on LD 1743.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I think we can do this by a show of hands. All in favor of moving to reconsider? Karen, let us know if you are ready. If you do not have your camera on, we will not count you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 members present and voting. 9 members present and voting. The motion prevails. We will open the work session on LD 1743 for the purposes of reconsideration. Representative Corey, would you like, I'm sorry, you want to see the bill analysis presented. And so,
I did have the opportunity to read the bill analysis. It was posted to the notes a couple minutes ago, so I'm good to go unless anybody else wants to see the bill analysis.
I think we have all had an opportunity to see it. In that case, I will entertain a motion on LD 1743. Representative Corey.
I would like to motion ought to pass. It didn't look like there was a fiscal note there or anything like that, so we don't need an ought to pass as amended, so ought to pass.
It's been moved to pass. It's been seconded by Representative Chiazzo. Is there any discussion of the motion? Seeing none. Karen, whenever you are ready, please call the roll.
Senator Hickman.
Yay.
Senator Hickman, yay. Senator Mearmont.
Yay.
Senator Mearmont, yay. Senator Farren.
Yes.
Senator Farren, yes. Representative Chiazzo.
Yes.
Representative Chiazzo, yes. Representative McCrate.
Yes.
Representative McCrate, yes. Representative Riley.
Yes.
Representative Riley, yes. Representative Supika.
Yes.
Representative Supika, yes. Representative Wood. Yes. Representative Wood, yes. Representative Kinney.
Yes.
Representative Kinney, yes. Representative Harrington.
Yes.
Representative Harrington, yes. Representative Corey.
Yes.
Representative Corey, yes. Representative Dolph. Representative Dolph, absent. 11 in favor of the motion, 0 opposed to the motion, and 1 member absent, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Karen. It's unanimous amongst those present and voting. The motion prevails. I will close the work session on LD 1743. And if there is nothing else from the committee, any comments, questions, concerns, anything from our analysts? Seeing none, we will meet again on Wednesday. Representative Chiazzo.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little slow on the buttons this morning. There was an email that came out from Majority Leader Dunphy regarding Representative Tuttle's services. So if anybody has not seen that, please let me know. I'm happy to forward it to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman and I will meet tomorrow to discuss our schedule for the rest of the week and the coming weeks. I would expect that we should be ready to take up any bills that have been tabled as soon as Wednesday. So be prepared just in case we do that. Any other questions or concerns from the committee? Well, Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs stands adjourned until Wednesday at 10 a.m. See you then. Have a great day,
Thanks. See
everyone.
you, everyone.